Hey guys, this is Lorentz from iWood Cosplay, and today I'm going to show you guys how I made these gamma boots.
We're going to start off with the cutout patterns. For this project, we're going to need various thickness of foam. Let's start by making this toe portion. First thing you do is transfer the pattern to the 6mm foam. Keep the pattern in place by pinning it down with some needles like so, and then trace it with a Sharpie. I'm going to flip the pattern to make a mirrored copy. You'll need 2 halves to make the toe armor. Once you have transferred the pattern onto the foam, carefully cut out the pattern with a utility knife. For this edge, even though it's curved, we're going to cut out along the imaginary line to make the 2 halves. If that doesn't make sense, I'll show you what I'm talking about in a bit. So I didn't cut along the pattern's edge, and I'll show you why after we put the 2 halves together. With a heat gun, heat up the 2 foam pieces. Here I'm using a round styrofoam ball to create a curve, but any round object will work. For example, a handle of a screwdriver. I actually prefer this method since the roundness of the handle allows me to create smaller curves. Once you heat form the 2 pieces, they should fit together like this. Now we're ready to put the 2 pieces together. Be sure to give your can a good shake. Apply contact cement only on this edge. Like the name implies, the glue needs to be applied on both edges to make a good contact bond. Once you're done, wait about 2 minutes. After about 2 minutes, if it's still a little tacky but not wet, then you're ready to put the 2 pieces together. Pick a corner and carefully put the edges together along the seams. Alright, you should have something that looks like this. So the reason why we didn't cut along the pattern's edge earlier is because I found it easier to heat form this toe region while the pieces are intact. But now that we have the 2 pieces heat formed, we're ready to cut out the details like so. If you do all this correctly, you should have something that looks like this. The next part we're going to do are the covers for the tongue of the boots. For these pieces, they have a sharp edge, and I'm going to show you guys how I make those right now. Keep in mind that this pattern portion is specifically labeled for this build. We're going to transfer the pattern onto the foam like so. Carefully labeling the pieces as soon as I transfer the pattern. Now I just have to do that for the rest of the pieces. To minimize confusion, I'm going to use separate pieces of foam for the flip portion of this pattern. Once you transferred all the patterns, you should have something that looks like this. With a sharp blade, get ready to create the bevels. All of these pieces are going to need a bevel along these edges. However, keep in mind, these outer edges do not need a bevel. If you cut these pieces correctly with the bevel, you should have something that looks like this. Now to do that with the rest of the pieces. Now that we have everything cut, we're ready to heat seal them with a heat gun. Keep in mind the corresponding pieces. We're going to apply contact cement only to these edges. Give it a minute or 2 to dry before putting the 2 pieces together. Same as before, pick a corner, then put the 2 pieces together like so. Once the edges are joined, you should have something that looks like this. Now we just have to do this for the rest of the pieces. That's one half, and now we have to do the same thing for the other. For the sake of time, here we have them. Now we just have to put the 2 pieces together along the midline. And that's how it looks like with 2 pieces together. Now we just have to do that for the rest of them. Here I'm grabbing the shoe to test fit the portion and seeing how it fits. That's how it looks like on my shoes. If at any point you don't like the fit, feel free to move the pattern around the best fits your sneaker. Here's an optional cut you can do for your boots. For the tips, you can trim off the edges for a flush finish like so. There you go. A small detail, but if you have the time, I would recommend it. Now we just have to cut out these pieces. And just like before, pin down and transfer it onto the foam. I'm going to use a straight edge for this particular side and then come back to fill in the details. This will allow me to cut details easier in the following steps. With a 1/2-inch brass rod, I'm going to punch out each of those details, sharpening one end of the brass rod with a utility knife. Once the end is sharpened, you can begin to punch out the holes like so. Now, this is the most tedious part of this build, so if you don't have a brass rod or don't want to do this, you can always swap out the circle details for squares, which you can easily cut out with a utility knife. But if you choose to do this method, the results will be worth it. Once all the holes have been punched, you're ready to cut out the detailed pieces. Realigning the straight edge along the line we made earlier, we will cut along the midline to reveal the hard work we've done. We'll do the same thing for the top piece. This copy is going to sit in the center like this, but there's one thing you'll notice: the holes do not line up. If they don't match up, don't worry about it. As soon as you curve the pieces as you should, these hole pieces should line up. So now that we've cut all the detail pieces, now would be a good time to take a break before we assemble the entire boot. Here's a trick of the trade. If you ever got excess contact cement on the seams, here's how you remove it. I use this product called Glue Gun. I spray it onto a piece of cloth and then carefully rub off the excess glue along the seams. You want to make sure you don't apply too much in case it gets into the seams. And there you have it, clean seams. Once you return from break, these portions from the boots need a backing as well as the rear pieces. Here are the patterns you'll need to make these backings. Transfer them onto 2mm foam and then cut them out like so. Now just apply contact cement to the backing as well as the reverse side of the necessary pieces. Once the contact cement is ready, you can put the two pieces together. This portion can be a little tricky, so just take your time and line up each of the legs. For the rear pieces, start by gluing the backing and then slowly curving it up. This will help maintain the shape of the final boot. Now for the front portion, carefully line up the pieces. The top portion should be 3 trenches away from both sides. Once you've done that, carefully mark the position. Then apply the contact cement and then put them together. Carefully lining up the trenches and lining up the holes as you move across from one end to the other. Just take your time and carefully line up the pieces. After all, you took a long time to make these. Now that all that's done, we're ready to test fit. Now this is going to vary from sneaker to sneaker, so just test fit the armor on your pair and mark the position accordingly. Here's something I would like to introduce. These are binding posts. I'll have a link in the description down below. You'll also need some sort of punching tool. Here I'm using my 1/2" brass rod to mark an approximate circle for when I need to punch my center hole. Once I've done that, I'm going to reposition the piece and mark the holes like so. Then I just punch out the hole and insert the binding post. Grab the other end and carefully screw it in. So that's how it looks like with articulation on the boots. Now I'm going to do the same thing and position the tongue over the boots. Once again, this is going to vary from sneaker to sneaker. Once you're happy with the position, pin them down with some needle.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop you guys right there. So before I move on, I actually modified this pattern. I took off about 1 inch on both sides right here. So it's gonna be 4 trenches away instead of the 3. So just keep that in mind when making this build. The reason for that is because I didn't like the gap that was creating for this portion. So that's why I did it.
So here's what I was talking about. I didn't like the gap. So here I positioned the tongue pieces further down. So this is how it looks like with the tongue pieces repositioned. I like this much better, and now I'm ready to move on to the next step. That is tracing the position with a silver Sharpie. You should have something that looks like this. Another place you can get binding posts is TNT Cosplay supplies. Here I'm using these because they come in 5mm lengths, and the previous binding posts were too long for my build. Just like before, mark a circle, then punch it out with your hole puncher. Reposition the corresponding tongue and mark the hole like so. That tells me where I need to make my hole. Do that for all the pieces. Once that's done, you're ready to put in the binding post. Once you're done doing that, you should have something that looks like this. Now the only thing left is to glue on the toe portion. Apply contact cement on both edges, give it a minute or two, and then put the two pieces together. Now keep in mind, you don't have to use binding posts, and you can just glue these pieces on, but you will lose out on articulation and the bolt details. And there you have it, Gamma Boots version 2.
Okay, and that's it for this build. To clarify, this front portion of the pattern is the only thing I modified. There you can see the original indentation and the 1 inch I took off. So if you guys have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below and I'll get back to you guys as soon as possible. If you guys like this build, you guys might like these other videos I've done on my channel, just feel free to check them out. And of course the patterns will be in the description down below, and they do support my shop and my YouTube channel. So if you guys end up buying it, thank you guys so much. If nothing else, you guys feel free to hit that subscribe button. Until next time, I'll see you guys then. Bye.